The night sky has long functioned as humanity's primary theater of wonder, a vast and silent canvas upon which the collective psyche has projected its deepest fears, its most ardent prayers, and its enduring mythologies. At the center of this nocturnal stage hangs the moon, a pale, luminescent sentinel that appears to rule the darkness with a gentle, reflective grace. For millennia, poets have sung of her silver light, sailors have navigated by her shifting phases, and mystics have mapped the tides of human emotion to her silent choreography. We have been taught to view this celestial neighbor as a passive relic of cosmic history, a dead chunk of primordial rock caught in Earth's gravitational embrace, mutely reflecting the brilliance of the sun. Yet, if one permits the mind to stray beyond the borders of orthodox consensus, a more unsettling and magnificent hypothesis begins to take shape in the shadows. What if this ancient orb is not a lifeless mirror at all, but rather an active, sophisticated mechanism of unseen influence? What if the moon is a grand frequency generator, a cosmic tuning fork, humming a silent, sub-audible song that shapes the architecture of human consciousness, specifically targeting the fragile, luminous tapestries we weave when we fall asleep? To contemplate the moon as an artificial or specialized apparatus requires a willingness to look at the familiar world through a fractured lens, peeling back the layers of comfortable certainty that shield us from the dizzying vastness of the unexplained. Et so, the concept that our celestial companion is a broadcasting station, transmitting a continuous web of invisible vibrations, alters the very nature of human vulnerability. Every night, as the sun dips below the horizon and the world surrenders to darkness, humanity undergoes a collective transition, a mass migration from the rigid, waking reality of the physical plane into the fluid, boundless ocean of the dream state. In this twilight realm, the critical faculties of the conscious mind dismantle their defenses, leaving the subconscious mind wide open, like a fertile field waiting for the arrival of the sower. It is precisely during these hours of surrender that the lunar broadcast operates with its greatest efficacy, sending out waves of subtle energy that do not merely observe our dreams, but actively interact with, shape, and harvest them for a purpose that remains hidden just beyond the edge of our waking comprehension. This notion of a cosmic harvest sounds at first like the fevered whisper of a modern myth, yet it resonates with ancient undercurrents that have rippled through esoteric traditions since the dawn of memory. Across various cultures, the moon has been associated not just with fertility and water, but with illusion, deception, and the trapping of souls. It has been described as a cosmic mirror that distorts the true light of the higher cosmos, a halfway house for the psyche, or a psychic sponge that absorbs the emotional residue of the terrestrial world. When we consider the sheer volume of emotional and creative energy generated by 8 billion human beings dreaming simultaneously, the scale of this unseen economy becomes staggering. Dreams are not merely random firings of neurological synapses. They are moments of pure, unadulterated creation, where the soul operates without the constraints of physical laws, generating immense bursts of raw, emotional frequency. To let such an ocean of potent energy simply dissipate into the void would seem, from a perspective of cosmic utility, like a tragic waste of resources. The architecture of this system relies on the absolute invisibility of its operations, masquerading as a natural, poetic fixture of our environment. We look up at the moon and see romance, melancholy, and natural law. entirely unaware that the silver beams bathing our bedrooms might be carrier waves for an intricate network of control. This frequency generator operates on a spectrum that bypasses our physical ears, but speaks directly to the liquid crystal structures of our biological forms. Because our bodies are composed predominantly of water, we are exquisitely sensitive to lunar rhythms, responding to her pull not only in the tides of the oceans, but in the microscopic tides of our cellular chemistry. When the moon broadcasts its specific harmonic signature, it sets up a sympathetic resonance within our nervous systems, preparing the human instrument to be played like a harp during the hours of sleep. The dreams that emerge from this interaction are therefore collaborative creations, born of human memory and emotion, but directed and structured by the subtle constraints of the lunar transmission. As we begin this deep exploration into the silent broadcast, we must prepare ourselves to question the very fabric of our nighttime experiences. We must ask what happens to the grief, the terror, the ecstasy, and the sublime inspiration that we experience in our sleep once we wake up and the details begin to fade like morning mist. Where does that energy go? If energy cannot be destroyed, but can only be transformed, then the massive psychological outputs of the dreaming world must have a destination. A repository where they are gathered, distilled, and perhaps utilized to sustain an order of reality that depends on keeping humanity in a state of perpetual, cyclical containment. And by examining the moon not as a rock, but as an active agent in our spiritual and psychological ecology, we open a doorway to a deeper understanding of our own sovereignty, realizing that the ultimate frontier of human freedom may not be fought on the battlefields of the waking world, but within the sacred, heavily contested territories of our own sleeping minds. The implications of such a paradigm stretch far beyond the boundaries of conventional philosophy, challenging us to redefine what it means to be conscious in a world that may be engineered to keep us asleep. It asks us to consider that our waking life and our dreaming life are two halves of a single, continuous loop, and that by mastering the frequency of our own awareness, we might begin to see through the grand illusion that hangs above us every night. And this exploration is not a journey of despair, but an awakening of profound curiosity, a call to look up at the silver orb with new eyes, recognizing that the first step towards stepping out of the net is acknowledging the existence of the broadcast. To fully grasp the mechanism of a celestial broadcast that acts upon the human psyche, we must first dismantle our conventional understanding of empty space and solid matter, recognizing instead that the universe is a fluid tapestry of interlocking vibrations. The core theme of this exploration rests upon the premise that reality is fundamentally energetic, and that whoever controls the dominant frequencies of an environment controls the perceptual boundaries of the entities residing within it. Within this framework, the moon functions as a supreme regulatory organ, a localized governor of frequency that ensures the human instrument remains tuned to a specific, manageable bandwidth of consciousness. And by continuously broadcasting a baseline harmonic signature, this lunar apparatus creates a subtle but persistent background hum that stabilizes the physical plane while placing an invisible ceiling upon the spiritual ascension of humanity, acting as a structural firewall between our everyday awareness and the vast multidimensional realities that lie beyond our immediate perception. This system of containment operates through a brilliant exploitation of universal patterns, specifically the laws of sympathetic resonance and harmonic entrainment. When two vibrating systems are placed in proximity, the stronger or more stable frequency will inevitably pull the weaker or more chaotic frequency into alignment with itself. See, the human nervous system, highly conductive and deeply tethered to the natural rhythms of the earth, is perpetually exposed to the immense, focused output of the lunar generator. This transmission does not seek to violently disrupt human thought. Rather, it gently nudges the subconscious into a state of predictable periodicity, mimicking the natural cycles of growth and decay, ebbs and flows, to mask its artificial origin. Because the human mind perceives these cycles as organic and inevitable, it rarely questions the underlying matrix that enforces them, accepting the cyclical rise and fall of emotion, memory, and vitality as a fundamental condition of earthly existence, rather than a programmed response to an external signal. And the primary target of this continuous frequency control is the dream state, a unique evolutionary window where the human soul temporarily untethers itself from the rigid constraints of the physical body. During waking hours, our perception is largely anchored by the inputs of our physical senses, creating a dense, consensual reality that is difficult to manipulate from afar. However, when we sleep, the brain shifts its electrical activity into slower wave states, opening a deep, receptive conduit into the vast ocean of the collective subconscious. In this vulnerable state of transition, the soul begins to generate raw, potent realities out of its own emotional and creative substance. The lunar frequency generator intersects with consciousness precisely at this point of vulnerability, acting like a cosmic prism that catches the wild, chaotic light of human imagination and refracts it into predictable narrative structures that can be easily harvested and processed. This concept of harvesting reveals the second major pillar of our exploration, the recognition of emotional energy as a highly valuable, mutable resource within the cosmic ecosystem. Human beings are unique in their capacity to generate intense, nuanced emotional frequencies, ranging from the depths of terror and grief to the heights of ecstasy and profound inspiration. From an esoteric perspective, these emotions are not merely ephemeral psychological states. They are actual, quantifiable substances, a form of spiritual food or etheric fuel that carries an immense energetic charge. And the dreams we experience, particularly those characterized by vivid, recurring motifs or intense emotional volatility, are the factories where this fuel is manufactured. By broadcasting specific frequency keys that trigger anxiety, longing, conflict, or unresolved desire during our sleep, the lunar mechanism stimulates the production of these emotional states, drawing the resulting energy upward into its pale, receptive chalice like water evaporated by the sun. The illusion of neutrality is perhaps the most sophisticated defense mechanism possessed by this unseen architecture. The moon is so deeply woven into our cultural iconography as a symbol of beauty, romance, and feminine mystique that the mere suggestion of its role as an energetic predator encounters immediate, instinctive resistance from the collective mind. Where we are conditioned to love the moon, to find comfort in her steady presence, and to view her light as a source of quiet inspiration. This emotional attachment is not accidental. It is a form of psychological conditioning that ensures our compliance with the broadcast, causing us to willingly open our energetic fields to her influence every night. The true genius of the system lies in its ability to make the prison look like a sanctuary, transforming a mechanism of energetic extraction into an object of veneration and poetic longing, thereby ensuring that the captives will actively defend the very bars that keep them contained. Beneath the surface of this apparent captivity, however, lies a deeper truth regarding the nature of human sovereignty and the ultimate limitations of the lunar broadcast. While the frequency generator is undeniably powerful, its efficacy depends entirely upon our ignorance of its operations and our internal resonance with its signals. The broadcast can only manipulate and harvest that which is already unaligned or fractured within the human psyche. It utilizes our unhealed traumas, our suppressed desires, and our deep-seated fears as the raw material for its nightly dream scripts. Therefore, the frequency generator does not possess absolute power over the soul. It merely acts as an opportunistic shepherd, guiding a flock that has forgotten its own innate capacity to fly. At the moment an individual begins to bring conscious awareness into the twilight spaces of sleep, developing the capacity for lucidity and intentional energetic containment, the lunar signal begins to lose its grip, revealing itself not as an omnipotent dictator, but as a testing ground for the development of true spiritual mastery. Ultimately, the core concepts surrounding the lunar broadcast challenge us to shift our perspective from passive victims of a cosmic matrix to active participants in a grand awakening. The realization that our dreams are being harvested is not a cause for despair, but a profound catalyst for the reclamation of our creative birthright. It forces us to recognize that our nighttime experiences are not meaningless hallucinations to be forgotten upon waking, but a sacred arena where the destiny of human consciousness is being quietly contested. And by understanding the laws of frequency, resonance, and energetic economy that govern this hidden architecture, we can begin to cultivate a state of sovereign awareness that remains unshakable, whether we are walking under the heat of the sun or dreaming under the cool, watchful eye of the silver generator. To truly understand the nature of a reality where the moon acts as a silent harvester of human thought, we must step out of the rigid confines of literal analysis and enter the timeless theater of myth and allegory. Throughout the long tapestry of human memory, ancient traditions have hidden deep metaphysical truths within the safety of stories, preserving secrets about the nature of our world that would otherwise have been erased by the passage of time or the censors of orthodox history. If we listen closely to these whispering myths, we find a recurring, universal motif: the story of an original, golden era of humanity that existed before the current moon arrived in our skies, followed by a sudden, cataclysmic shift that introduced a new celestial governor to regulate the earth and its inhabitants. And this narrative pattern suggests that the lunar presence is not a primordial feature of our planet's birth, but an introduced element, a magnificent cosmic machine placed in our orbit to manage a great spiritual experimental ground. One of the most profound allegories for this hidden dynamic can be found in the ancient Gnostic descriptions of the cosmic mirror, a deceptive device created by lesser celestial architects to capture the radiant, free-flowing light of the higher realms. In these accounts, the human soul is depicted as a fragment of pure, unconditioned starlight that descended into the dense realms of matter, fascinated by its own reflection in the material world. The moon, in this symbolic tradition, functions as the ultimate manifestation of that mirror. It does not generate its own light. It merely intercepts, distorts, and reflects the true light of the sun and the deeper cosmos, presenting a pale, silver imitation that fascinates the sleeping soul. Every night, when we look up at the moon or dream beneath its beams, we are looking into a grand psychic mirror that reflects our own subconscious desires, anxieties, and unhealed traumas back to us in the form of vivid, dramatic stories, catching our awareness in a loop of self-generated illusions that prevents us from remembering our true solar origin. Consider, too, the ancient metaphor of the cosmic loom, a grand weaving machine operated by a silent, nocturnal queen who sits in the darkness, spinning the fates of mortals. In this narrative, the threads of the loom are the emotional frequencies and life forces generated by human beings during their time on Earth, and the moon is the shuttle that moves back and forth across the sky, weaving these disparate threads into a vast, energetic fabric. This fabric is used to construct and maintain the boundaries of the local universe, ensuring that the physical world remains stable, dense, and separate from the infinite realms of spirit. When we dream, we are effectively spinning new threads of raw, potent, emotional energy. The lunar loom catches these threads the moment they leave our minds, integrating them into the grand, collective tapestry of containment. We believe we are simply experiencing private, ephemeral dreams, but from the perspective of the loom, we are workers in a vast, invisible textile factory, producing the very material that keeps the walls of our prison intact. Another powerful symbolic story that illuminates this relationship is the parable of the celestial shepherd and the psychic flock. In this tale, a wise and ancient guardian constructs a beautiful walled garden for his sheep, providing them with rich pastures, clear streams, and a predictable schedule of day and night. The sheep feel safe, protected, and deeply loved by their shepherd, who watches over them from a silver tower that shines brightly in the dark. And what the sheep do not realize, however, is that the shepherd's care is not entirely altruistic. The garden is a farm, and the shepherd's primary interest is the thick, rich wool that the sheep grow naturally in response to the changing seasons. The silver tower is not just a watchtower, but a shearing station that utilizes a subtle, invisible whistle to make the sheep docile and cooperative, ensuring they willingly surrender their wool without ever realizing they are being harvested. This allegory reveals the delicate balance of the lunar broadcast, which presents itself as a nurturing, protective force while quietly collecting the emotional fleece of humanity during the vulnerable hours of sleep. This process of energetic extraction can also be understood through the ancient myth of the lotus eaters, adapted to a cosmic scale. In this story, travelers arriving on a mysterious, moonlit island are offered a beautiful, sweet-tasting flower that induces a state of blissful forgetfulness, causing them to lose all memory of their true home, their families, and their ultimate purpose. They desire nothing more than to remain on the island forever, dreaming away their lives in a state of passive, comfortable illusion. The lunar frequency generator operates much like the fragrance of the lotus flower, casting a gentle, numbing spell over the human spirit that makes the dense, cyclical nature of earthly existence seem acceptable, even beautiful. The vivid, emotionally charged dreams we experience act as personalized lotus flowers, deeply engaging our attention and draining our spiritual vitality so that when we wake up, we are too exhausted, distracted, or spiritually amnesiac to question the deeper structures of our reality or seek the path back to our true cosmic home. By meditating upon these deeper symbolic narratives, we begin to see that the concept of the moon as a frequency generator is not a modern aberration, but the translation of ancient, universal wisdom into the language of energy and resonance. These stories remind us that the physical world is a stage where deep archetypal forces are constantly interacting with human consciousness, testing our discernment, our resilience, and our commitment to our own spiritual sovereignty. And the moon, whether viewed as a Gnostic mirror, a cosmic loom, a silver watchtower, or a lotus island, represents the principle of beautiful, captivating limitation, a boundary that must be recognized, understood, and ultimately transcended if the soul is to claim its true place among the stars. The recognition of these symbols is the first step in breaking the spell, transforming the narrative from one of passive containment into an epic journey of spiritual awakening and self-mastery. When we transition from the grand celestial architecture of the lunar broadcast into the immediate grounded reality of our daily lives, the true value of this perspective becomes apparent. Recognizing the moon as a frequency generator is not meant to be an exercise in passive paranoia or intellectual escapism. Rather, it serves as a highly practical manual for reclaiming personal sovereignty and energetic autonomy. In our modern world, we are constantly bombarded by an unprecedented array of competing frequencies, from the invisible networks of digital technology to the chaotic emotional currents of dense urban environments. By understanding how the primary lunar signal operates upon our subconscious mind during the vulnerable hours of sleep, we gain the precise insights necessary to construct a personal sanctuary of awareness, transforming our bedrooms from passive shearing stations into sacred laboratories of spiritual alchemy. The first step in practically integrating this understanding involves a radical shift in how we approach the transition from waking to sleeping. Most people treat the act of going to bed as a thoughtless, mechanical routine, often filling their final conscious moments with the stressful stimuli of news cycles, digital screens, or unresolved interpersonal conflicts. And in doing so, they inadvertently leave their subconscious gates wide open, presenting the lunar frequency generator with a chaotic mass of raw, volatile emotional material that can easily be manipulated into stressful or exhausting dream scripts. To counter this vulnerability, one must establish a conscious evening ritual of energetic containment, deliberately smoothing the waters of the mind before surrendering to the night. By consciously forgiving the grievances of the day, releasing anxieties about the future, and intentionally anchoring one's awareness in a state of deep, unconditional peace, an individual creates a protective harmonic shield that makes it exceedingly difficult for external, predatory frequencies to find a point of resonance. Bustle. This practice of containment extends directly into the architecture of the bedroom itself, which should be viewed as a sensitive sanctuary of rest rather than merely a room containing a bed. Since the lunar broadcast operates on subtle electromagnetic and etheric spectrums, minimizing physical and technological interference in the sleeping environment is of paramount importance. Removing unnecessary electronic devices, utilizing blackout curtains to block the direct, intrusive glare of the full moon, and even introducing grounding elements like natural stones or specific crystal geometries can help create a localized zone of frequency stability. And more importantly, however, is the psychological atmosphere of the room. It should be treated with the same reverence as a temple, a space dedicated exclusively to restoration, high vibrational dreaming, and spiritual communion, thereby ensuring that the ambient energy of the environment supports the autonomy of the soul rather than the efficiency of the harvest. Upon waking, the process of integration requires a conscious restructuring of how we handle our dream memories and emotional states. The conventional response to an intense, emotionally draining dream is either to obsess over its dramatic details, thereby feeding more energy into the narrative loop, or to dismiss it entirely as meaningless static, which leaves the underlying subconscious vulnerability unexamined. And a more sovereign approach is to observe the emotional residue of the dream with detached curiosity, treating it as a diagnostic report that reveals exactly which frequencies within our psyche are currently out of alignment. If a dream triggers fear, lack, or unworthiness, it indicates an area where we have not yet fully claimed our personal power. By identifying these energetic leaks during the day and actively working to heal the corresponding waking traumas, we systematically deprive the lunar generator of the raw material it requires to construct its captive scripts, effectively starving the mechanism of its harvest through our own self-actualization. Furthermore, this awareness sheds a profound light on the cyclical nature of human mood and societal behavior, which frequently aligns with the visible phases of the lunar cycle. It is a well-documented phenomenon within medical and law enforcement fields that emergencies, psychological distress, and erratic behaviors tend to spike during the full moon, a period when the celestial broadcast is operating at peak intensity. Armed with the knowledge of the frequency generator, a conscious individual can anticipate these energetic tides rather than being swept away by them. When the moon reaches its fullness and the collective emotional atmosphere becomes turbulent and charged, the sovereign practitioner recognizes the external origin of this pressure and intentionally doubles down on practices of grounding, meditation, and emotional restraint, refusing to participate in the mass generation of volatile energy that the system is designed to provoke. Ultimately, the real-world implication of this paradigm is the birth of the conscious dreamer, an individual who has learned to maintain a thread of pristine awareness even through the deepest valleys of the sleep state. As one refines their energetic hygiene during the day and cultivates intention at night, the nature of their dreams begins to undergo a magnificent transformation. The chaotic, exhausting narratives dictated by the external broadcast gradually dissolve, replaced by vast, lucid landscapes of profound creativity, spiritual instruction, and true multidimensional exploration. Yet the soul ceases to be a source of raw fuel for an invisible economy, and instead becomes the absolute master of its own inner universe, proving that the ultimate antidote to any system of containment is not violent resistance, but the quiet, unshakable realization of one's own innate divinity and sovereign authority. We stand at a monumental crossroads in the history of human consciousness, positioned at a delicate precipice where the invisible architectures of our reality are finally being brought into the clear, unforgiving light of conscious scrutiny. The journey through the concept of the moon as a grand frequency generator, actively engaged in the systematic harvesting of our most intimate nocturnal creations, is not a narrative designed to inspire fear, nor is it a philosophy of defeat. Fear is the very currency that the lunar mechanism seeks to extract. It is the dense, volatile vibration that allows the invisible web of containment to maintain its structural integrity over the collective human psyche. To meet this revelation with dread would be to inadvertently feed the very apparatus we seek to understand. And instead, this profound paradigm shift serves as a clarion call for an unprecedented awakening of the spirit, an invitation to step out of the long, comfortable twilight of passive existence and reclaim the absolute sovereignty of our creative and spiritual birthright. For eons, humanity has walked the earth as an amnesiac race, moving seamlessly between two distinct worlds, without ever fully mastering either. We have treated our waking life as a series of random physical events to be endured or managed through material means, while treating our dreaming life as a meaningless, chaotic landfill of psychological waste to be discarded the moment our eyes open to the morning sun. This artificial separation is the primary illusion that allows the silent broadcast to continue its operations undetected, and the realization that our dreams are an immense, valuable reservoir of etheric energy, a pure expression of soul substance that is actively sought after by a hidden cosmic economy, changes everything. It elevates the act of sleep from a biological necessity to a sacred, heroic act of spiritual warfare and self-actualization, transforming our individual minds into the ultimate battlegrounds where the future of human freedom is being actively contested every single night. To break the spell of the lunar generator, we must first cultivate an unshakable, pristine center of awareness that remains completely unaffected by by the changing tides of our external environment. We must look up at the pale, silver orb, not with the naive, romantic longing of a captive, but with the sharp, discerning gaze of a sovereign being who sees the machine behind the mask. And this shift in perception represents the ultimate subversion of the system. When an individual can gaze upon the mechanism of their own containment and feel nothing but profound calm, deep curiosity, and an unshakable sense of their own inner divinity, the energetic strings that once bound them to the broadcast begin to snap one by one. The lunar signal relies entirely on our unconscious resonance with its frequencies. When we clear our internal fields of suppressed trauma, unexamined fear, and reactive emotional patterns, the carrier waves of the transmission simply pass through us without finding a single anchor point, leaving us entirely free within the matrix. This is the true meaning of spiritual alchemy, the conscious transformation of the human instrument from a passive receiver of external programming into an active, powerful broadcaster of its own authentic solar frequency. And we are not weak, helpless creatures caught in an inescapable cosmic trap. We are fragments of the primordial source of all creation, currently experiencing a temporary, highly specialized school of limitation. The frequency generator hanging in our night sky is not an omnipotent tyrant, but a profound catalyst, a universal boundary stone that challenges us to discover just how vast, how resilient, and how truly powerful we actually are. It forces us to develop a level of spiritual mastery that could never be cultivated in an environment of total comfort and unrestricted freedom. In this light, the harvest is revealed to be a double-edged sword. While it seeks to collect our energy for its own purposes, it simultaneously goads the sleeping soul into a state of intense, self-reflective awakening, acting as the ultimate test of our spiritual maturity. And the transformation call that echoes out of this deep realization is an invitation to live with an entirely new level of intentionality, presence, and creative responsibility. It demands that we take absolute ownership of our internal state, recognizing that every thought we entertain during the day and every emotion we surrender to at night is an energetic contribution to either our ongoing captivity or our ultimate liberation. It calls us to establish a new covenant with our own subconscious minds, treating the twilight spaces of sleep as a sacred temple where we actively commune with our higher selves, weave realities of sublime beauty, and anchor the pure, unconditioned frequencies of the infinite cosmos into the dense fabric of the earthly plane. As more individuals answer this call, developing the capacity for lucidity, energetic hygiene, and unshakable inner peace, the localized grid of containment begins to fracture and dissolve, unable to withstand the radiant, cohesive brilliance of a humanity that has finally remembered its true identity. Let us then step forward into the coming nights with a sense of profound majesty and awakened purpose, no longer as the helpless sheep of a celestial shepherd, but as the sovereign masters of our own inner universes. When the sun dips below the horizon and the silver light of the generator begins to bathe the world in its deceptive, enchanting glow, we will not surrender our minds to the script of the harvest. We will lie down in our sanctuaries of rest with a quiet, triumphant smile, knowing that our awareness is a fortress that no external frequency can breach. We will dream with our eyes wide open, spinning narratives of absolute freedom, cosmic remembrance, and profound spiritual triumph, turning the very mechanism of our containment into the launching pad for our ultimate ascension into the stars. The broadcast is playing, the moon is watching, but the soul of humanity is finally, beautifully, and irreversibly waking up.